So let's just go ahead. We're zoomed out. Let's go ahead and zoom on into Chicago, Illinois. So Chicago, Illinois was home to the World's Fair in 1893. So the World's Fair was actually 600 acres, and it was the first World's Fair to be illuminated by electricity. So it was the first time people got to experience things like elevators and the electric chair. It actually debuted at the Chicago World's Fair. Now, the fair organizers actually made a city within a city. So the World's Fair was actually known as White City. So there are still a few attractions around that you can visit today. Let's go ahead and take a start with the Museum of Science and Industry. Now, the Museum of Science and Industry used to be called the Palace of Fine Arts. So when they were planning the Chicago World's Fair, they basically had to promise all these different countries that this building wasn't going to catch on fire. Chicago is famous for catching on fire. In fact, the ice skating rink at the Chicago World's Fair caught on fire. So this building had a lot of extra safety measures and to prevent it from catching fire, and that's exactly why it's still around today. It actually first housed the Field Museum, but the Field Museum moved to a different location, and then the Science and Industry Museum moved on in. So you've got a better picture of it from on the right of today, and to the left you have an aerial view of the Science and Industry Museum, or as it used to be known, the Palace of Fine Arts. All right, so up next we're going to take a look at the Statue of the Republic. So the Statue of the Republic was designed by Daniel Chester French. Now that's the same gentleman who designed the Abraham Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. So the Statue of the Republic used to be called Big Mary. She was called Big Mary because she was originally 6 stories tall. The one you see here on the screen is just a replica. She was put in this roundabout in Chicago shortly after the end of the World's Fair to honor Big Mary, but she's only a third of the size of the original Big Mary. Let's go ahead and pull up that picture again. So if you take a look, you can see in black and white that Big Mary was much bigger. You got a good view of her backside, but you can see her in scale to the people walking down that ramp. Now, next up, we're gonna go take a look at the Wooded Island. So the World's Fair organizers realized that they could plan buildings and events, but they couldn't really plan the landscape very well. So they called up Frederick Law Olmsted, and that is the gentleman who designed New York Central Park. So the Wooded Island is his most lasting example of what he designed for the World's Fair, and it actually has a Japanese garden on it. And the Japanese garden was not necessarily destroyed, but vandalized during World War II by anti-Japanese folks. It was a very stressful time, and they decided they didn't want to have anything that looked remotely like Japanese cities in their city. So it has been repaired, and you can actually tour the Wooded Island right now. It's really beautiful. Let me go ahead and close this out. You can see the Wooded Island right here with 2 lagoons. If you zoom out just a little bit, right to the north of it is the Science and Industry Museum. So when you're walking around the Wooded Island, you can actually see a lot of vantage points of the Science and Industry Museum. It's really beautiful. And last, we're going to go where all of this planning happened. So the building is known as the Rookery. Still standing today. This is where they planned everything for the Chicago World's Fair. All the blueprints were drawn here. And it's really historic. In 1905, Frank Lloyd Wright redesigned the lobby. Here you have one of the stairwells. You can actually get this on a poster. It's a very popular picture. Now this building, the Rookery, you can see it right here, used to be one of the tallest buildings, but as you can see, it kind of got fenced in. So back when they were planning the World's Fair, you could go to the top of the Rookery and you could see for miles. Now, those are just the main buildings that are still around from the Chicago World's Fair. There are some smaller things like a ticket booth that you can see, but those are unfortunately on private property, so you definitely have to get permission before you see them. But all the buildings that I showed you today and the park, the Wooded Island, those are all places that are open to the public, and you can visit them anytime that you might be in Chicago.